Welcome back to Impractical Privacy. I'm Sudo. Imagine buying a diary, a thick leather book with a sturdy brass lock. You write down your deepest fears, your business strategies, your private medical concerns, and the intimate messages you only want your partner to see. You snap it shut, turn the physical key, and slide it under your mattress. You feel a sense of total sovereignty. Now imagine a law gets passed tomorrow morning that mandates every diary manufacturer must install a tiny microscopic microphone inside the spine. It doesn't record everything all the time, they promise. It just listens quietly. And if a proprietary, closed-source government algorithm thinks you wrote down something illegal, it silently broadcasts a copy of your diary pages straight to a federal database. They tell you it's for your own good. They say it's to protect the vulnerable. They call it safety. But let's call it what it actually is: the complete execution of the physical wiretap, scaled to global proportions and baked directly into the math of our everyday lives. Right now, as we record this in 2026, we're witnessing the opening salvos of a coordinated global war on end-to-end encryption. This isn't a hypothetical threat cooked up by paranoid cryptographers in an academic white paper. This is a massive multinational legislative blitz. From Canada's sweeping bill C-22 to the draconian frameworks quietly rolling out across the UK and Australia, governments are no longer just asking for a backdoor. They are trying to legislate math out of existence. They are demanding that tech companies build client-side metadata tracking and hidden scanning mechanisms directly into the apps you use to talk to your kids, your doctors, and your attorneys. And the angle they're using to sell this to the public: the ultimate, inarguable trump card: online safety. Protecting the children. Stopping the bad guys. It's a masterclass in psychological leverage. Because if you stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, the math of encryption shouldn't be broken, they immediately turn the cameras on you and ask, why do you want the bad guys to win? What do you have to hide? It's the same old trap. But on today's show, we're going to step entirely outside of that emotional matrix. We're going to strip away the political grandstanding and look at the brutal architectural reality of what happens when you introduce a trusted observer into a zero-trust environment. We're going to talk the client-side mirage, why scanning your device before encryption happens is just a backdoor with shinier marketing. We're going to talk the geopolitical spillover, how a law passed in Berlin or London instantly compromises a user sitting in Texas or Tokyo. We're going to talk the death of mathematical sovereignty. What happens to a society when privacy is no longer a fundamental property of the universe, but a revocable license granted by the state? Grab a drink, secure your endpoints, and let's get into the weeds. Let's talk about the math for a second. True end-to-end encryption is beautiful because it's absolute. When you send a message on an app like Signal, the text is encrypted on your local device using a key that only the recipient possesses. It travels through the wilderness of the internet as complete gibberish. The server in the middle, the company routing the message, sees nothing but a chaotic string of random noise. For a decade, governments hated this. They tried demanding master keys, but engineers stood their ground and said, we can't give you what we don't have. The math doesn't allow it. So bureaucrats changed their strategy. They realized they didn't need to break the mathematical vault during transit if they could simply place a spy inside the room while you were typing. Enter the architectural horror known as client-side scanning. This is the exact mechanism being pushed heavily by the architects behind Canada's Bill C-22. It's the exact same mechanism being pushed in the UK and Australia. They aren't asking companies to stop using HTTPS or decrypt the database on a server. Instead, they want to force developers to build a scanning engine directly into the application on your phone. Think about the cruelty of that design. Here's how it functions in practice. You type a message or upload a photo into a chat app. Before the app applies the encryption algorithm, the built-in scanning software intercepts the data. It hashes the file and checks it against a centralized government database of forbidden signatures, or runs it through a local machine learning model to analyze the text. If the algorithm gives a clean bill of health, the message is encrypted and sent on its merry way. If the computer throws a flag, the unencrypted file, along with your metadata and location, is quietly bundled up and beamed to law enforcement. The politicians selling this will look you straight in the eye and say, see, the message is still end-to-end encrypted in transit. Your privacy is preserved. It's a total semantic illusion. It's a complete joke. It's like saying your house is totally secure because you have an elite biometric lock on the front door, while ignoring the fact that the city council forced you to install a state-mandated security camera directly above your toilet. And just like the facial recognition algorithms we talked about last episode, these client-side scanning systems suffer from a fatal flaw: automation bias and cognitive laziness. What happens when an AI model inside your phone misinterprets a benign photo of your kid at the beach as something malicious? What happens when a sarcastic political joke is flagged by a crude sentiment analysis algorithm as an act of radicalization? The system triggers an automated report. The machine says guilty. And suddenly, your device has betrayed you to a state entity before you even hit the send button. You cannot sandbox an operating system if the application layer itself is mandated by law to act as an informant. There is a dangerous sentiment among tech users that geography protects them. You might be sitting in a jurisdiction that doesn't have a Bill C-22. You might think, well, that's Canada's problem, or that's just the UK being the UK. But in the digital ecosystem, software architecture knows no borders. When a government like Canada, the UK, or Australia passes a law that threatens tech companies with billions of dollars in fines or jail time for executives who refuse to comply, these companies face a harsh economic calculus. They have two choices: pull out of the market entirely or rewrite their code base. And because building and maintaining two completely separate versions of an ultra-complex encryption app is an engineering nightmare that creates massive security vulnerabilities, companies often default to the lowest common denominator. The weakest security standard mandated by a major Western market quickly becomes the global baseline for convenience. This is what I call compliance as a vector. Once the infrastructure for client-side scanning is written into the main repository of an application to satisfy a law in Canada, that backdoor exists globally. The code is there. It is sitting in the binary on your phone, dormant. just waiting for a configuration flag to be flipped. And think about the terrifying potential for feature creep. Today, the government says the scanner is only looking for the absolute worst of the worst. Crimes that everyone agrees must be stopped. But once the pipeline is built, the target changes. Next year, it's expanded to track copyright infringement. The year after that, it's adjusted to flag for tax evasion or unauthorized financial transactions. In times of civil unrest, it's tweaked to suppress political dissent or keywords that criticize the ruling party. We've seen this pattern again and again. Security features are stripped down and surveillance features are quietly dialed up because strong, uncompromising privacy creates friction for the state, and friction makes it harder for them to manage the population. When you strip an individual of the ability to communicate without an algorithmic chaperone, you aren't just changing a setting in a software app. You are fundamentally redefining the power dynamic between citizens and the state. You are transitioning from a society built on the presumption of innocence to a society built on continuous, automated, pre-crime verification. All right, deep breath. I know this sounds incredibly bleak. It feels like the global surveillance net is tightening, and the very math we rely on to protect our lives is being targeted by a cartel of international bureaucrats. But we don't do panic on this show. We do preparation. You cannot encrypt your face from a state camera, but you can choose which code runs on your hardware. When the threat model is a global legislative war on end-to-end encryption, your digital hygiene has to shift from passive configuration to active sovereignty. Here is your practical path forward right now, today. Number 1, ditch centralized compliant messengers. If a messaging platform has a massive corporate footprint, a board of directors, and billions of dollars in legacy revenue to protect, they will eventually bend the knee. They cannot withstand a multi-nation state embargo. Move away from platforms that rely on traditional phone numbers as your primary identity key. Look towards open source, decentralized protocols where there is no corporate throat to choke. Applications built on the Matrix protocol don't have a central office in Toronto or London that a judge can have raided. They don't hold keys, and their architecture makes client-side enforcement practically impossible to implement uniformly. Number 2, embrace peer-to-peer and local-first tools. The ultimate defense against client-side scanning forced by an app store is to step outside of the app store ecosystem entirely. For file sharing and collaboration, look at tools like SyncThing or Keat. They operate on local-first, peer-to-peer architectures. There is no middleman. There's no corporate app wrapper acting as an enforcement mechanism for state mandates. The data moves directly from your device's storage scope to your peer's device's storage scope. Encryption at the root. Up next, sideload and freeze your code. For those of you running a hardened Graphene OS build, or even a standard Android device in this case, you have a massive advantage here. You don't have to accept the vendor's updates blindly. If a major messaging app announces a mandatory update to comply with local safety regulations, do not update. Use tools like Obtainium and F-Droid to pin your application versions to verified pre-compiled releases. Turn off automatic app updates across your entire fleet of devices. Force every single binary change to clear a manual gate. Number 4, poison the metadata well. If governments demand access to your metadata, the map of who you talk to, when you talk to them, and how often. Make that metadata completely useless. Route your encrypted traffic through decentralized networks like Tor or the NIM mixnet. By wrapping your encrypted packets in multiple layers of global routing, you break the primary key connection between your physical IP address and the cryptographic handshake of your messenger. They might force an app to scan, but they won't know whose house the packets came from. We've covered some heavy ground today. A coordinated global dragnet masquerading as child safety laws. Laws designed to force a digital wiretap onto every phone on Earth. And the chilling reality that corporate compliance is a vector that compromises everyone, regardless of where they live. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by this. It feels like the ground beneath our digital infrastructure is turning to quicksand. But I need you to understand something fundamental. Math doesn't have a legislative chamber. A government can pass a law declaring that the number 2 plus the number 2 now equals 5. They can print it on parchment, stamp it with a golden seal, and threaten to jail anyone who disagrees. But the moment you step into the real world and put 2 pebbles in your hand alongside 2 more pebbles, you will always have 4. Encryption is not a privilege granted to us by a benevolent government. It's a fundamental property of mathematics. It's a law of physics. If you mix data with a sufficiently large prime number, nobody on Earth, no prime minister, no president, no client-side scanning algorithm can read it without the key, unless you willingly hand it over. The moment you choose to use tools that you control, tools where you compile the source code, tools where you hold the cryptographic keys on a device running open source firmware, you stop being a subject of their digital empire. You become a sovereign entity. So here's your homework for this week. Step 1, perform a communications audit. Look at every chat app, every email provider, and every cloud storage bucket you use. Ask yourself if Canada's Bill C-22 or the UK's safety mandates forced this specific company to install a scanner tomorrow, what would they see? If the answer is everything, it's time to migrate. Step 2, go decentralized. Set up at least one communication channel this week that does not rely on a centralized corporate entity or a physical phone number. Establish a link with your inner circle, your family, your friends, your closest colleagues, on a platform that doesn't feature a corporate login box. Step 3, talk about the math. Next time you hear someone parroting the talking point that we need to weaken encryption to protect the online space, change the vocabulary. Don't let them call it a safety protocol. Call it what it is, an automated, mandatory physical wiretap. The state wants adoption. They want you to accept the illusion of privacy while they quietly install a lock that opens from the outside. Prove them wrong. Take the key back, because the math belongs to everyone, and your sovereignty was never theirs to regulate. Thank you for listening to Impractical Privacy. Don't forget to check out impracticalprivacy.com for tracker-free streaming, show notes, and all the various ways to support the mission to stay completely ad-free and independent. I'm Sudo. Stay skeptical, stay safe, and never trust a messenger that knows the contents of the message. Until next week.